So if we look back at our map, right, we see that we are, kind of patrolling this, right? If we use this random patrol, right, like there, you know what, this is like pretty decent, especially if we have like a lot of like available police and a lot of potential cars, right? So might be like great if we have an increase in officers. This is a way for me to advocate for having more officers, right? So I can do this, right? This is great. We have like this increase in cars, and it's great, if we like have the ability to, pay, do the maintenance and stuff like that, right? The problem is, right, is that we don't live in this world of abundance, and we don't have that capability in policing, right, to really make like a random control successful, right, in the long term, right? Because while we can do it randomly, and we will ultimately end up, preventing crime in this way, right, to some degree, it may not be really worth it, right? Because we have to keep in mind back into our scarcity kind of issue, right? And so if we have, a scarcity problem, we have to consider, how this like achieves our goal of preventing or reducing crime. So if we use the strategy of random control, right, yes, we will deter some, right? But if I'm asking for resources, if I'm trying to increase like the amount of influence that a police department has, right, it's not going to be that effective, right? We know this is going to be true because this, like the degree, even though we will prevent some, right, may not be an efficient use, may not be efficient in terms of like how I'm trying to maximize my return, right? So in this particular case, then, right? So if we know this is not efficient, right? How do we make things more efficient? So if we think back to our grid, right, of the city that we had, it's a different grid, so don't worry. It's right here. I got it for you, right? And if I have, my police car, we're just going to move it up here. Why? Because I feel like it. So if we have this police car, right, and I'm trying to figure out where it is, right, and I know I have, sort of like limited resources, right, I have to find a better way to use my limited resources, right? Has to make sense for me. I'm not going to get any more. I might even be losing stuff, right? So I don't really have the option of using like random patrol, right? It's just not ultimately like efficient enough for me, right? Kind of a problem, right? So what do we do? Well, if I know that I have limited resources and I'm trying to find like the best way to handle things, right? I might want to take a more nuanced look at things, right? So if I want to do something a bit more nuanced, right? I probably want to get a sense of like how can I maximize it, right? That's ultimately what I want to do. So what is going to be the best way to do this, right? Do I just get more officers? Not an option, too expensive. Do I get more patrol cars? Not an option, too expensive, right? Do I ask people to stop committing crime? And like we could try, but there's no guarantee that's going to work, right? So if we take a more refined look at things, right? We might want to do it based off of like greatest need, right? So we could do greatest need or demand for police, right? And what I mean by that is not necessarily like people like asking for police, right? Because they're, you could get to some hoity-toity area where there's a lot of like, ultra-rich white people in gated communities, like, we want police because we have our property. But that's really not like a good efficient use, right? Because a lot of crime isn't going to happen there, right? Maybe behind closed doors, where you can't see it, but like not out on the street, not where it's visible, not where it's causing a harm, right? So if I want to do this right, if I'm thinking about the greatest need of man that might require the most attention, right? I might start looking at, well, are there any patterns that I can see, right? Because in theory, crime could happen anywhere, right? It could happen next door, nearby, wherever, right? But as it turns out, right, we'll see that there are cases where crime is ended up being clustered in certain areas, right? We'll see it here, it'll be certain neighborhoods, certain blocks, certain addresses, right? And what we end up finding, right, is that there are a couple things if we look at calls for service in a city today, and this is something that is empirically true. It has been demonstrated like a billion times, right? So a couple things that we know about crime, right, is that one, crime is concentrated in that certain areas, addresses, spaces, right? Crime is concentrated. And to the point where like 3 to 6% of all places have about 50% of all crime, right? Well, it's pretty creepy, right? You wouldn't really expect that, we might think of certain places as being like high crime areas, but we may not necessarily be like aware of like the degree or the magnitude related to that, right? That's pretty cool, right? The other part that's kind of creepy too is that we also know that these places are incredibly persistent. And what I mean by that is that, if you think about a certain crime place, right? This particular location, say here, we know that there was a high crime area, today, it'll be a high crime part tomorrow, next week, and it was also one about 5 years ago in most cases, right? And so over 5 years, it's the same places over and over and over again, right? They do not change, right? It has this like immutable quality. For whatever reason, right? They just refuse to change, right? This is it, right? This spot right here, but I'm marking in green, has always been a high crime spot and always will be for kind of years, right? You can maybe, there might be some shift during the time of day. It might be on certain days of the week. But I know that this particular quadrant and all these other red quadrants, right? Or not quadrant, red, areas, right, are always going to be a problem. They're a nuisance. Can't get rid of them, right? So what do I do in this situation, right? So how do I go forward from here? What's going to be the issue, right? Well, in this case, if I'm a police commander, right, and I'm taking my patrol route, right, what is going to be a little bit more efficient, right? So I'm going to go to this spot for sure, right? Boom. Definitely going to go there. I might say we go here next. We're going back over here. Maybe, we're back here to this green spot, and then, back over here, right? The route might look something like that. Why do I do that, right? So, what are the gains from this? So, the first gain that we end up seeing, right, is that one, we're focusing our deterrent power in, like high need places. We're sending them there. We're saying, get the job done, get it out of here. We're going to send it right there, right? We're also saying because we're not telling, while we know the places aren't random, right? We may be like randomly, pick our order or the timing. of order or timing of patrol car allocation. So I know I'm going to go to this place for a little bit. I'll know I'll go to that place for a little bit more, and so on, right? So I'm still having like a semi-random event, right? But I'm focusing on these areas, right? Because I know if I know here that this limited number of area like causes most of my problems, right? If I focus on them, right, in those areas, because I know they cause most problems, right? If I'm able to deter in that area, prevent crime from happening, right? This is going to be a better allocation of my resources, right? So it's more efficient because I have the greater need, and I can probably expect more of a return from my patrol allocation. So from a police commander standpoint, in this case, right, then like I look good, smart maybe, because I'm not taking any part, right? Using it's requiring more effort in terms of like I have to find the places, I have to tell them to go to these certain places, I have to train officers as to why it's going on, right? But it's intentional and effective because it is targeted. And that's why this is going to be a more efficient use of like a patrol aspect, right? Is like right in those areas, it'll be good to go.